So good morning. We'll get started. I'm Dave Reuter with Franklin Soil and Water. This is our annual MPDES training webinars, our series that we're trying out this year with this odd year as it is. So I hope everybody's getting something out of this. And this, I think, this format allows us to take a little deep dive into each one of these MCMs. So if it's your first time here or if you're returning, we're going to be revisiting some things because a lot of this does tie together in an overall program. I hope this is kind of the MPDES 101, but also, I expect that a lot of you know a lot of this already. So bear with me if there's things I go over that you do know. Bear with me if there's things I cover again and again, because this is the annual training and that's what I do. And then we will be looking at that, like I say, that little deeper dive into the new permit that's coming out. We have an old permit that we're working on, and the new draft should be out. The new permit actually should be out any day now. So that's kind of what we're expecting. I guess a little housekeeping as usual. Use the chat box if you have questions, or feel free to unmute yourself and jump in. I've got Brooke is with me today. Brooke Fresher with the district. She's helping watch the chat box and keeping me in line when I forget things and should have mentioned it, and hopefully she picks up on that and helps out too. So feel free to chime in. We got Kylie here as well. What we're going to be doing is poll questions. I do ask that you participate in those. This is how we're tracking your participation throughout the webinar. So do participate in these if you can. If you're in a group setting, that's fine. If you're in that group setting, though, perhaps do a sign-in sheet and let us know how many you participate, so we can keep track of that for your annual training purposes as well. So I appreciate that. Looks like the poll question's up. Got about 70% voting, so let's let this go a little bit more. Hopefully we can get 100% voting. Just like yesterday, I hope we get 100% voting. Everybody do your part and vote. '23, '24, looks like we're settling down. I think we've almost got it. Like I say, if you're in that group setting, I can understand. So really a poll question: do you do site reviews, inspections as part of your job? We're looking at, most everybody here is really taking a look at site plans or doing site inspections, and this MCM that we're going to be doing, is directly related to that, construction, post-construction, and hopefully, we can talk about it, have some conversation about it, and see what changes are going to happen with the new permit, and possibly things you might take away from this and implement in your own program. So let's move on. Next slide here. This is my soapbox minute brought to you by the Burning River. This is, as we've said in the past, our past webinars, Cuyahoga River catching fire. If you haven't seen these pictures, they're pretty dramatic. I always like these, and this was the fire in the 50s. It's caught fire 13 times in records, so this is not an unusual occurrence, or it wasn't, and it happened with some regularity. This one in particular was the most damaging, the most photographed, the one that actually occurred, that made the changes that we saw. Really was in the 69 fire, and that out of that came the Clean Water Act and the NPDES program. So that's really the impetus for Clean Water Act. Little NPDES history. I'm going to cover this stuff fast. We've been going over this with all of the presentations. So just for those of you that may be new to this, NPDES history, this is some of the laws that happened. The Clean Water Act, what we know as Clean Water Act, came around in 1972. This was a federal act. And this really gave the states the ability to enforce the Pollution Control Act. So statewide control was created at that point. 87 amendments really created the NPDES program, the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. That's what NPDES stands for. That was really, kind of the standard operating procedures for communities on how they were going to address water pollution. This brought about the phases. So phase one kicked in 1990, just for large municipal separate storm sewer systems and large construction sites and the industrial permits as well. 99, you've got the phase two rules, which likely affects most of us. I know we've got some Columbus folks on here that are phase ones. And they've been doing, that large construction control for a long time. And the phase twos, the smaller communities, the satellite communities. Our county permit is actually was done under the RAP developing communities. So that's what the phase two rules cover. This is all under that 40 CFR in the federal code. Locally, statewide at least, ORC 6111 was the no discharge of pollutants unless it complies with the NPDES permit. That came about in 92. And the OAC really developed the water quality standards in the 98s. Small MS4 rules, were really codified since 2004. So, in the long run, we haven't been doing this in the long run. There's a lot of updates to be made. And, going back, this is all about water quality. And go back to that burning river, that's where we're looking at. This is our progress towards water quality on the large scale. So what is NPDES Phase 2, National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System? Like I said, if I use acronyms that you don't understand, please put it in the chat box or butt in and say, hey, Dave, what are you talking about? We do use a lot of acronyms, but I hope everybody's getting familiar with these at this point and understand them. So like I say, it's a federally mandated EPA regulations addressing both water quality and quantity. It applies to all MS4s in the nation. And the MS4, if you're curious about that, it's based on the census tracts. You can find that data online pretty readily. So it's based on the 2020 census. It's based on the 2016 census. We have the 2020 census, and that will be getting updated. So you may have communities or areas of your communities that come into the MS4s that you might need to address. So something to consider in the longer term. You probably won't get census data till 2022, but then again, you may have areas in your MS4 that are expanded and included in those regulations. And that could be significant, especially with the new permit and the inclusion of the TMDL standards now. There's a lot of performance standards that are coming down based on the TMDLs. So here's just an illustration of what we're talking about MS4. If we look at the MS4s, it really depends on which program, which MCM you're looking at. I mentioned this in the past webinars as well. If we're talking about illicit discharge, that's based on discharge to your MS4. So if you have discharges coming to assets that you manage, you likely need to be able to enforce that illicit discharge. When we're talking about construction, I look at this not an MS4 up here. Well, that red line, let's say that represents, outside of your municipal boundaries, and that would likely be the case, not be subject to your MS4 boundary indicators. These other ones, are discharging to structures, and likely in that construction mode, you would be required to enforce something like that. I guess what we needed to include here was this scenario here for construction inside your MS4, where it's discharging to possibly state waters. A lot of facilities like this discharge to fourth order streams, but they may have construction and post-construction devices within your MS4 that are discharging to a streamway. Because that is within your MS4 and because that's construction, you would be required to watch the long-term operation of that post-construction and have that. The mapping of that is curious and something I would also want to look at EPA, Ohio EPA, on how to quantify that. This always comes up in annual reporting when we're talking about applicable sites and how they discharge. This scenario up in the corner with construction sites that are within your municipal boundaries, you would actually be responsible for that long-term operation and maintenance of that facility. And the mapping requirement, does it discharge to your MS4? Well, not really. Is that an applicable site? I would say yes, it is an applicable site because you are meeting the construction general permit, and having all of these assets. Really, the point of this is to understand what your drainage area is and what's contributing to your area. So it's not as clear cut as an illustration might be always, but do consider that when you're looking at some of these projects, what's required. So let's talk a little bit about stormwater management program, commonly referred to as a SWAMP. All communities, all MS4s should have this program, really written out. This is kind of your who, what, whens, and wheres you're going to do these practices and how that's going to be implemented. So, like I say, it really outlines what's going to happen and tells, gives it's assigning the authority that you have to do that. It's selecting the BMPs that you're going to use within your community. And this applies across the board to all of the MCMs that are in the program. MCMs, what are they called? Well, let's look here first. Permit wise, like I said, we've got a permit date here that is our effective date is the 2019. We're past that. We have a new permit out. If I can get to it here. Oops. It froze up here for a moment. Hold on a second. New draft permit is out. No effective date yet, but this number 4 will be out shortly. We're expecting it anytime soon. Let's see. This is actually giving me.
Seeing some captions show up on
I see that.
I think there's an option for that.
New technology. Sorry, guys. I'm still struggling with. Well, now you're probably seeing the wrong stuff, aren't you? Yeah, hold on a second. I don't know what I did here. Okay, am I on to that page 6? Everybody seeing that?
Page 6, yep.
Okay, just something I wanted to point out here. And I don't know where that captioning is at.
There. I think that fixed it.
Is that off now? Okay.
Yep.
The old permit's got this 2 years when you apply for your coverage under the new permit. The old permit was 2 years in the making to get those underway. Not seeing my new permit coverage. So what I've done here is pretty much cut and pasted the red line edition of the new permit, the draft permit. And this is talking about effective date is 180 days from the effective date of this permit. So that is one of the changes that I want everybody to be aware of. When you do apply for coverage, your program and your swamp should be updated in that 180-day period. So in that program, you might have regulations that need to be updated, and you have your swamp to be updated. Hopefully, there is not much changes to be made, but that 180-day period, I know we've made comments to Ohio EPA on that time period being pretty tight for quite a few changes if your program is not up to speed. You may have some significant things to make changes for, so be aware of that. Like I mentioned, the NPDES permit, what does it mean? It's based on these 6 minimum control measures, public education involvement. That was our first webinar that I hope everybody got a chance to see. If you didn't, we are recording these and you can go back and take a look at those. I will say if you want any kind of training credit for that, you're going to be responsible for your tracking of that. If you do a sign-in sheet or whatever, you're welcome to use that as part of your training. Like I say, it's just documenting that will be up to you for those contact hours. So public education involvement, MCM 1 and 2. We did illicit discharge the other week. That was number 3. And today we're looking at the construction site runoff control and post-construction site management. Next week, we'll be doing the good housekeeping, pollution prevention as the last and final installment of this series. So I hope you can join us for that as well. A little bit of animation. Here we go. Construction, post-construction, site management. That's what we'll be looking at today. So some of the changes, the draft changes for MCM 4 and 5 are using that objective tool and documenting correspondence regarding plan reviews and inspections. So if you're not using a checklist for, when you do a SWIP review, that's something they're going to be looking for is having that ability to objectively look at these and review these plans. Requiring enforcement protocol, notices of violation, enforcement and escalation plan. You should have that. Let's look a bit. Let's see, did I jump ahead? I don't have my darn other view here. I don't know why I'm not getting that. I apologize once again here. Dealing with technology. Oops. Now I suppose you're seeing back to my, just not sharing the right screen. I'm sorry about this. I'm having a heck of a time today. Construction site runoff control, old permit. We're looking at land disturbance greater than an acre. Develop an ordinance, so you need to have your regulation in place. You need to have other controls in place for other waste, such as litter, chemical, concrete, washout, that kind of thing. Procedures for stormwater pollution prevention, the SWP3 review, and site inspection enforcement. So what we're seeing now in the new permit is some clarification on things. as well as some additional requirements. And this was one of the things that I highlighted, at least in the permit, was include a written enforcement escalation plan. So if you don't have that, you need to get one. We can offer some assistance with that as well. I have here's an example of what ours looks like. And I will say something that we ran into, at least with Ohio EPA, was the difference, really the difference in semantics and what we were calling things. If you look at our escalation process, this first notice of violation, this really occurs basically every time we do an inspection. I mean, I haven't been on a site yet that didn't have a maintenance issue that they needed to correct, whether it's a silt fence down, sediment sock somewhere missing, or a catch basin insert, something like that. So they all have maintenance issues. We don't call that a notice of violation. Ohio EPA would probably disagree with that, and their first inspection on those would be called a notice of violation. So this really outlines what our expectations are. And if you see that, if we look at the corrective action up here, the definition with that one there, that footnote, that corrective action involves a scheduled site revisit and does not include routine maintenance unless no action has been taken. We do our inspections on a 2-week schedule anyway, so when I first saw this change, it was like, well, this doesn't affect us much. We're doing 2-week inspections anyway. But it does affect the reporting of NOVs to your annual reporting, because now we're looking at, our site inspections, if there's a maintenance issue, is basically an NOV. That's that first notice of violation. We return in 2 weeks to see if that's been taken care of. If it has, it's been taken care of. If not, that escalates that to that notice of violation. So be careful of those semantics. I just wanted to put that out there, that we are meeting the same enforcement goals as Ohio EPA as far as schedules goes. There's no 2-week interval that goes by without some kind of enforcement action, but it's all based on our inspection schedule. And when we're looking at truly getting to that enforcement, I know the county looks at enforcement as when we take that to either a stop work order or it's going to the prosecutor's office. That's what they're considering that violation aspect. We're looking at this from a site inspection procedure and what those are. So if you do that, be sure it's good to really outline what your procedures are. Have that justified in your SWAMP, and show how you're progressing these sites towards making getting BMPs on the ground. So this is straight out of the construction performance standards. Ordinance or regulatory mechanism at a minimum equal to the construction permit. Most communities have gotten that already, but some of them have referred to permits by number, and you're always going in and having to update your regulations. So my recommendation has always been, reference the most current version of the permit. That way you don't have to go back in and change your ordinance or update your ordinance. And again, there's that within 180 days of the effective date of the permit. So you've got 180 days when this permit comes down to affect changing your language if you need to. SWP3 review. Again, we're looking at that objective tool and checklist as indicated there. Documentation of communications regarding review and plan revisions. Any notification to obtain NPDES permit coverage shall be maintained. Again, they're looking for that documentation of what changes have occurred. It's not just a matter of reviewing that, but also if you made recommendations for changes, you know, what those were and recording that. I will say something that we run into problems with here in the county regarding this is the NOI process with OEPA. There are projects that we don't see that occur within, you know, the Darby Accord area, or possibly, you know, they're utility based, but because they aren't related to zoning, we may not see these projects until ground is broken, and that has been somewhat problematic on a couple of these sites, particularly like large utility projects. Those are reviewed through the state, and that NOI, the only way we get notice of it is to search the NOI database for Franklin County and see what's happening at that point. And we've suggested to OEPA that they coordinate with the MS4s when there is NOIs issues like this, because we are tasked with managing that construction aspect, regardless of what the project is. If it's over an acre, you know, the MS4s are tasked with the management of that construction site. So something that we've made comments to, at least on the last draft, and we'll see where that goes in the future. Okay, so I think I'm at another poll question. That means we're about halfway through. Do you use a checklist for site reviews and site inspections?
Hey, Dave, this will be a good time. We did have a question come into the chat box.
Great.
So if you can speak to what if you find an issue on a site and ask the construction manager to fix the issue, and they make an attempt to fix the issue, but it's still insufficient?
So depending on what it is, if you looked at our escalation process, we do have some corrective action categories. With anything that rises to that level of corrective action, we'll be doing a return visit within 3 days. So, you know, if they've got a basin basin's a bad example, you've got 10 days to fix a basin. Something else, you know, say a drainage swale with check dams that's not working well, you know, really causing an erosion problem. We'll call that a corrective action that needs to be repaired within 3 days and return to that site within those 3 days to see that it's done. That'll be, if it's not done at that point, you know, that's strike 2, and we're going to strike 3 with the stop work order. So we're getting their attention quickly on egregious problems. You know, a maintenance one, again, like I say, if it's maintenance, we'll be back out in 2 weeks. If it's the same maintenance problem, or they didn't correct it well enough, you know, we're going to be looking at, you know, if they attempted to make changes and it's not working, that's one thing. That would just take them back to that. You again need to do that maintenance aspect. If what they're doing is just, you know, thumbing their nose at you, you need to continue with that escalation process. We've had really good partnerships with our developers for the most part, and I think with our 2-week inspection schedules, we become familiar faces. You know, we're there for water quality. We're not there to hammer their sites or hinder their progress. I'd much rather see them build out as quick as they possibly can and get these things buttoned up. So we're there to help, and I think that's been pretty well received, and we've had pretty good success with those. Wouldn't you agree, Rep?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think sometimes it takes a little while to coordinate repairs that might be needed on site too. So, you know, maybe they're using something that just initially was thought was going to be an effective control, and they're having either some maintenance issues with that, or so as long as they're working towards, you know, trying to find a better alternative or repairing that as I'm on site, usually they're pretty responsive and willing to try to work on something.
Yeah. So I'm seeing about 2/3 of you have site review and inspection checklists. We do have those resources if you need to check those out. EPA does as well. we have tailored ours down. One thing I will say about checklists, especially for site inspections, we found that, originally we were using a checklist basically to send to sites, and it was, extensive boxes to be checked, and, whether it was good or bad, whether it needed maintenance. And, we found that it's just too much for somebody to look at. What you want to do is focus on the problem. So that's really where our inspection forms have gone, is a very quick inspection. You mark what is the problem, you focus on that, and you ask for that change. So that way, when you do send out any kind of information to the site manager, they're seeing exactly what that problem is and not focusing on, okay, is my SIP fence okay? Yes, it got an okay. Is my wattle okay? Yeah. Is that catch basin okay? Yeah. They don't have to go through that. They're focusing on what you want to get changed and what needs to happen. So good to see that. Like I say, if you're doing those objective reviews, though, you really need to be looking at the same SWIP issues all the time, or whether it's applicable or not, and checking that out.
Hey, Dave, we've
All
got
right.
another question
Yeah.
that popped in there.
Okay.
So just curious, how else our MS4 checklist might differ from the construction sites checklist provided by the Ohio EPA for the operator's checklist. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about, possibly just the length.
EPA's
really.
is pages long.
Mhm.
It's inclusive of everything that you should be looking at.
And everything that may or may not be applicable on your site. You might not even
Right.
have some things that are on that checklist. So trying to whittle that down so that it is more focused on exactly what that particular site has on site makes it a little easier for the people, especially on site, that are doing their own weekly and after rain event inspections themselves. They can definitely have their own template and own checklist, but ours is just essentially a one page.
One page. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And then we usually include the photos of any things that are delinquent in that. And usually that also goes along with, I'm usually talking with somebody directly on site if there is something that I'm going to be following up with in the report, or calling somebody. They have my number, I have their numbers, and it's really, I think, the easiest way to go about that.
And I think that's a good point, Brooke. We really make it a point to be visible on site and to have these people know who we are and what we're there for. In my early days, I felt like I was the enemy, coming on the site, and you had to stealth around and you were going to report on them and things like that. And we've just taken the approach that, this is a collaborative effort. I'm not there to stop development. That's not my job. It's to make sure that this happens in a way that we're protecting our natural resources.
Awesome.
All right, let's move on. Did I get all the questions? Any more questions?
Good there.
Checklist. I'm seeing the polling site come back up. Let's see. Ensure compliance. Where am I at? I kind of forgot where I'm at. Ensure compliance. All applicable sites shall have an initial inspection. Let's see. An objective tool software. Ensure conditions. New permit. Something to note there at the bottom there. These inspections are to be conducted by the MS4 or their contracted representative. They are in addition to the self-inspections required for construction site operators. I think this is missed a lot of times on communities on what the purpose of these site inspections are from the MS4 standpoint. This is a third-party inspection of those. There's still inspections required on site by the contractors for their BMPs after storm events. So one of our check boxes on our checklist is, are their documents in order? We're going to look at their inspection documents to see that they're doing what they should be doing as part of our inspection. So that's an important one there to realize. I know I've had I've worked with some communities that were actually kind of subsidizing the construction inspections for their community. You know, the sites weren't expected to do their inspections because, well, the community will have their inspector on, and why are we, you know, doing these inspections as well? So they were going out after storm events and inspecting sites. I'm not saying it's not a bad idea to go out after a storm event and look at some of these sites. We do that frequently. It's really a good time to go out and make sure the BMPs are working as they should, and you know, really check things out. So it is a good time to check sites. I'm just saying that if you get there, take a look at their documents, and they should have an inspection site that, or inspection form that shows they also looked at their BMPs that day as well, and made repairs as needed. So I mentioned TMDL performance standards. This is something that has been new in all of the MCMs. We're seeing a lot more directed at the TMDLs. This is really an outgrowth of what's happening up in Lake Erie, and how those annex-based nutrient loads are going. And this is how we're addressing these on a statewide permitting level, looking at these performance standards. So something that is to understand here, this TMDL performance standard, with your small MS4 discharges to a watershed with an approved TMDL that has the following: the suspended solids or the nutrients, then your construction program will look at sites every 14 days. You know, you got to kind of look at this on a month, instead of the monthly basis that's required by MS4s to do site inspections. They're saying if you've got this TMDL for suspended solids or nutrients, and your construction activities have started with no SWIP completed, or they haven't installed any BMPs, or they've not implemented anything, or they've got dewatering activities with turbid discharges, you're going to be looking at that site every 2 weeks. This doesn't apply to all your sites. It applies to these conditions for those TMDL areas. So something to think about. You know, it makes again, like I say, I wasn't too concerned about this because we do our inspections on a 14-day cycle. But if you're in that monthly cycle for inspections, and you have areas that are going to fall under this Appendix A now, you may be looking at specific sites that have some of these until you bring them into compliance. So again, that's being aware of construction in your MS4, being able to apply your regulations to those, to make changes in these instances for your inspections. And then you can see there your monthly inspections can be returned to a monthly basis for the construction site once compliance with the above compliance issues have been addressed and verified. So be aware of that. That is in the new draft as well. I threw this in here. This is just some clarifications for annual reporting, number and list of applicable sites in your jurisdiction for the reporting year, number of pre-construction SWIPs reviewed, number and average frequency of site inspections, number of violation letters, reports, notices issued, and the number of complaints, external and internal, received. So, you know, it's just a little more detail in your annual reporting numbers. Just be sure that you're collecting that information as well. And I expect that this will be reflected as well in the annual report form. That's all done through the eBiz now this year. If you haven't gotten notice of that, be sure to check with them. Okay, let's talk a little bit about post-construction runoff control. This probably won't take as much time because a lot of this goes right with your construction review. You know, if you think about it, you're reviewing post-construction controls during the construction phase. This is something I've always, you know, had a problem with on annual reporting, divvying out the post-construction from the construction. It's really kind of one and the same until it truly is finalized and goes to that post-construction phase. And at that point, that's where you're ensuring that long-term maintenance plan that's in place. Really, the only things that apply there is you have an ordinance that makes them implement that to ensure that long-term operation and maintenance of those facilities. Something changes in MCM 5 here is identifying the post-construction type on your stormwater system map. And I know that's something we've struggled a little bit with because we've been outfall mapping since we walked the county streams, probably 14 years ago. That was 15 years. We did all the streams in Franklin County, mapped every outfall. But that's all we got. We have data with pipe outfall sizes and locations. We didn't look as far upstream to say, oh yeah, that's a stormwater pond up there, or that's a bioretention cell, or that's a rain garden or whatever. We've had to go back and always are updating that information to get that map in place for these post-construction devices. Again, a new section. If you take a look at the red line, there's a lot of new red in these performance standards. I do encourage you to take a look at that as well and see what applies to you and what's significant to you. You may have, this is kind of my opinion on how things are going. So be free to take a look at that and consider what consequences these may have on you. Again, this, like I say, is just like the construction. You've got the 180 days effective date of the permit to make those changes so that they comply with the permits. Pre-construction SWIP, again, having that objective tool for post-construction as well. I'd say probably the only difference here between this review would be that long-term operation and maintenance. Who's the responsible party, and how are you going to ensure that the long-term operation and maintenance is met, as well as inspections. This is something else that is going to trip up a lot of people, a lot of programs, is how are you doing those post-construction inspections. I believe we've got long-term controls being maintained per existing long-term O&M agreements. Your program shall include a minimum one on-site inspection of each post-construction runoff control during this permit term. So this really gets down to having that third-party inspection of these long-term operation and maintenance plans. All of these post-construction inspections need to be inspected in your program somehow. Now, whether that's sending a letter to the owner and asking that they provide that information, I think that would probably qualify as your MS4 inspection of that facility. You made sure that they are living up to that O&M plan that they've had as part of their zoning compliance or their plan review at some stage, but you're able to check that off of your post-construction within your community. Some communities are hiring folks or doing it in-house, going out and actually checking those on site. I know a lot of people are hesitant to go onto private properties to look at these. Maybe that's where you do the letter. There's other opportunities to if it's generally speaking HOAs or subdivisions that have stormwater ponds, access is pretty easy. That can be done in-house or done by a private consultant. But there is going to be that need to show that you have looked at your post-construction devices within your community over that permit term. So look at your programs and see how that's going to take place. We can help with that. Again, like I say, we're more than happy to help you address some of those concerns as well. We work with a lot of the communities around Franklin County and have various avenues to achieve those goals. So let us know if you need help with that. So another TMDL performance standard, if you're discharging to the EPA approved, if you have an EPA approved TMDL for TSS nutrients, your post-construction program shall provide educational opportunities to contractors, SWP3 designers, and or their employees on Table 4 practices and or other green infrastructure practices. In addition, your program shall include at a minimum one of the following performance standards: retrofit an existing peak discharging stormwater practice during the permit term, perform restoration of channelized streams, or update facility design requirements that require the Table 4 practices. So I think for the most part, everybody is recommending the Table 4 practices. If your regulation is saying to follow the most current version of the construction general permit, you're applying those Table 4 practices. If you're not doing that, you may have to look at some of these other practices, whether it's retrofitting practices. And I think all of these are good. These are promoting implementation within your community. Have that chance to look at, existing stormwater practices, and you're able to do a retrofit on those. Those are great opportunities for that community outreach. And this goes back to MCM 1 and 2. If you want that public participation, public involvement, or even addressing one of your themes, which is the developer outreach theme that you're required to meet, this be meeting part of that goal with that kind of outreach. But this is really looking at how do we encourage green infrastructure practices, and how do we do that in our communities. So now it's becoming a requirement, particularly if you've got that TMDL performance standard in your area. Again, the annual reporting, just some clarifications and the details of what you're reporting to. So the post-constructions for the reporting, number of applicable sites. Again, those applicable sites may be tied up in your construction site reviews. You may have already reviewed a post-construction review for that year because it's an applicable site. It may not be finished. It may not be up and running into the O&M, long-term management side of it, but it would be something that you'd looked at in a pre-planning stage. Pre-construction SWIP reviews and approvals for post-construction, again, tied to that construction review, verifying that post-construction runoff controls were built per requirement. This is, again, we look at this during construction phase. When we're looking at those post-construction aspects, they should be built during the construction phase, of course, and per spec there. A lot of communities hold a bond back and do a final punch out list, and hopefully you're catching these post-construction controls built per requirement at that point during that construction phase. That's where that really moves into that long-term operation, is once we're done with the construction and we're really talking post-construction and what those applicable sites are at that point. So be aware of that. Number of enforcement actions taken for failure. Again, this is only going to come up, particularly with post-construction on failing systems in that long-term operation and maintenance. long-term O&M plans developed for post-construction, and long-term inspections performed on the, so those last two, you know, are, well, at least E is probably applied in the construction phase, and F is probably more in that truly post-construction aspect. Like I mentioned, everything's being reported this year. Annual reporting is going through eBiz, and if you didn't get the message, they are changing their format, or at least their platform, I think. By November 5th, today, make sure you know your email address and password. Do some of those things that they ask you to do to get on to eBiz. So you have a smooth eStreams experience for this reporting year, which is rapidly approaching. So I think with that, I have one last poll question. Did you learn something new today? So hopefully this isn't an indictment of my webinar skills, and hopefully we get a positive response to what we had here today. Brooke, was there any chat questions?
Yes, actually, I did want to circle around. We did have a couple pop in there. One was just asking if we use a specific website to confirm rainfall amounts, to confirm after rain event inspections are required. I say that I do not. Generally, if it's raining here where I live, or if I know we're getting rain, I just expect that somebody's out maintaining things. So when I get on a site after a rain event that's swept through the county, if things aren't clean, or I know what they looked like the last time I was out before the rain event, and that's where looking at the site contractor's logs on site to make sure, you know, they either have a rain gauge on site, or they have an app themselves. I know there's a lot of inspection reporting apps now. That one in particular I've been kind of looking at is Compliance Go, and that has a pretty neat feature where they will essentially send you, or the site contractor, if they are set up through it, a reminder that there might be a weather event needed based. And I don't know what they use for their weather recording on that, but there are some pretty neat apps out there. You know, sometimes in the past I would use like the underground weather channel. I don't know how much, I haven't looked at that lately, but there's definitely a lot of different ways to go about that, but I personally don't look for.
Yeah, I think, you know, you really got to look at the broad scale there. Some of those stations, you know, are I hate the airport station. It seems, you know, summertime we get heat island effect, and our prevailing winds are right off over the airport.
Yeah.
They will get a storm event there where, you know, there in Gahanna, they both get hammered by storm events.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else sees. So
right,
so
and even sites within the same community can be dry or not have gotten a drizzle, yep. And then the next one, you know, a mile down the road has gotten dumped on. So
yeah,
it's,
yeah. We had a storm event when we were monitoring Griggs Reservoir and had a station up there, and that station told us they had close to a 500-year rate event in that little locality, and it had rained that day, but the variable nature of storm events, you know, if you have an area-wide call for rain, chances are one of your sites probably got some rain, and it's up to them to be checking their BMPs after a rain event too. So if it did rain there, you know, I'm hoping I see some activity in their site inspection reporting.
Right, and that's the good indicator to see if you don't see any activity, then you know you definitely need to check those log activities on site.
Yeah, and they should be looking at them regardless within a week. Anyways, there should always be at least one site inspection in there when you come back.
Right.
Look at that.
The other question there it goes along with the TMDL, is just asking, should we be expecting an expansion of the TMDL program in the future for watersheds that don't currently have TMDLs? And I think yes is the answer there, as TMDLs get adopted.
It may not be the TMDL program per se, but I do think we're always progressing towards better water quality. And I think, that's a good thing. We really need to address this. Again, my soapbox minute is this is all about water quality. Everybody has the right to clean water. We should not be polluting that haphazardly, or it's something everybody can get behind. And I really truly believe that that's an important aspect of this. So yeah, I do think you'll see continued upping of the ante there on what we do. It's just how we get there, whether that's the TMDL program or not. I'm not sure. Well, I see the returns are back. Just one person didn't learn anything. Darn it. I almost was 100% there. I'm happy to know that for the most part, everybody got a little bit of something out of this.
Yeah.
I see we are getting close to our time. I managed to fill another hour. I appreciate you being here. Tune in next week. We'll do our final one on good housekeeping. Yeah, go ahead, Brooke.
I just wanted to, I meant to throw it in here real quick. Just a reminder that also next Thursday afternoon, there's an OSWA, Ohio EPA webinar as well. And that's going to be regarding some of the MS4 audit information regarding all the MS4 programs. So I will be sure to send that out. And yes, there will be a recording of this. And I'm planning on sending out emails to everybody after next week's final webinar on MCM 6. And that'll have the recordings for all of these. They're going on our YouTube channel. And I can, if you want that beforehand, I can definitely send it to you. But that's my current plan, is to do that all next week. Let's see, let me send, sorry. No, I'll send the, I wasn't quite ready to share the information about that OSWA webinar. But I think it was in the email I sent out to everybody again this morning. So if you need it, just let me know, and I'll send you the link.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, and be sure to attend next week. We'll hopefully see you next week for the good housekeeping training.
Yep.
See ya.